know me, and it was like, oh, what the heck is this dude doing? Hey guys, what's going on? Memes
You know
here.
what? You know what happened one time? I played. You remember when Elon Musk had his little, trying to land his, trying to launch
The,
and also land
are you talking
the
about the time it
rocket?
blew up?
Basically landed. It appered to be landing
Oh, the
perfectly.
thing that he actually blew up intentionally just because it had those issues. Dude, we were watching that. It's like, oh my god. Dude, man, literally issued the self-destruct code to his own vehicle.
I
I
don't
mean,
know
for
about that,
safety
but
reasons.
I just had like a little quick little GIF. It's a GIF, right? Yeah, I had a quick little GIF of it happening because it was just
Some
so
people like
comical.
Jiff.
It was so comical because it, like, landed, and then as soon as it looked like it was such a good landing, and then it was just like kaboom, and I got a copyright strike or some sort of strike after having played that basically, like, in the background as a kinda
Right.
quasi joke during the stream. That was recognized as spam, and I guess I'm just paranoid, and the backstory to this audience is that, Memes wanted to play his traditional intro music, but I was paranoid about the copyright strike. So that's on me. And I see we've got some. I see we've got one of your fans in the chat, Wookiee Supremacy. I think
Oh,
that's
let's
your
see.
fan, and
Let's see.
Lambie.
See
Thanks for
there,
joining.
what's going on, Lambie?
Hey,
And Dave
Laborious,
Boreas.
welcome back.
Well, welcome, welcome. We're going to be talking a little bit about the universe because the interesting thing was we just take that scenario right there, and then you start to think about how humans interact and everything. It's like, well, a bunch of wavy particles, but it's like wavy particles we can kind of measure, but it's like, how do you try to measure humanity? Are we just using clicks? Are we just using interactions and everything? It's like, what is the actual goal? What are we attempting to optimize for? I don't know. Is it money? Is it self satisfaction? Is it trying to take over the internet? That's my goal. But all I'm saying is humans, humanity, we got the universe. We're all part of the one, however you may want to reference that. So if we're in the game, why don't we play it the best we can? Because of also like the interaction within everything. So whatever you're going to do is going to have a consequence. Whether or not it's going to shift the entire fabric of reality in one direction or another, maybe you need a crash once in a while.
Have you become a monist, Memes?
I'm not saying the more and more I boil down to things, my whole stuff and things equation times force equals the universe could probably really just be boiled down to stuff and things, but just for human conceptualization, having a third component force to help differentiate more, it's easier to keep my mind from exploding. That's
I
basically what I'm
like
saying.
that.
It
Monad
might
as
be
a necessity for
electromagnetism all
not
the way
losing your
down. I
sanity.
don't know, which may confirm turtles. I don't know.
I guess I wanted to ask you, first off, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, and I don't, but what the best metaphor for hyperbolic geometry is. Because at this point, I'm sort of stumped. I'm almost at the point being like it's hyperbolic and crossing my fingers that no one asks too many questions in terms of like giving them an
You
intuitive
mean actually digging
impression
into
of
the
what
depths?
that
It's like,
means.
okay, this is the category of things that are going on. What exactly is going on? The best thing I could have as far as construction goes, because this is the thing that kind of bothers me. A lot of times when we're trying to like communicate different ideas, we'll just say it's the quantum eraser effect or it's quantum physics. So difficult, we'll never know. It's like, well, doesn't it really just mean it's like we're counting tiny bits and pieces of different stuff and things? I mean, isn't it we're quantizing it? We're attempting to count the best we can. And now if we have a hint at why we can only really count so far from based upon our points of observation, we're actually starting to understand, oh, there literally is the limit of us being able to observe. It's like, okay, why may this be the case? We've got Thad's works, which seems to reveal a lot, but I'm like, we need more people on this. We need more people to notice different things that are going on, perhaps related research on something completely different. It's like, wait. Because this whole thing, it's like the first time I was introduced to any of this twister stuff, going around the outside or whatever rotation twice, was basically from Dr. Eric Weinstein on the Joe Rogan's Experience, where many such great adventures begin, apparently. But all I know is I found that fascinating. And he elaborated, he's like, Well, you basically have the Philippine wine glass trick where they basically do that 720 rotation. And it's like, that's very interesting. That's a way that my mind can start to grasp what the heck may actually be going on. So it's like, okay, basically, my best explanation is if you've ever played and tried to build things with pipe cleaners. Because basically, quantum physics, I'm just like, okay, if you're going to build things, we had Legos. You had blocks. If you want to build big things, we had mega blocks. If you wanted to build smaller things, we also had micro blocks. Just kind of phrase it like that. And all I know is it's not like Minecraft is one of the most popular games in the world. I think it is. I got stuck in
You
a hole
lost me
last
in
time I played.
Minecraft. Not gonna lie.
Wait. What I'm saying is, if we can relate things in a way that people want to say, you say quantum physics, a lot of folks are just like, I can't understand that. It's like, all right, we're doing building using physics with micro blocks, really small micro blocks. It's like, okay, go on. You haven't necessarily lost a person at that point.
But it's
And
not
yeah, I think
microblocks.
I know it's not, but it's as a broader comparison, just based upon the category of size. It's because mega blocks, if you're going to do planets and like stars and stuff like that, the blocks would need to be so much bigger as well. But it's at least of a scale that you can just feel like, okay, it's another magnitude or so, sometimes more.
Maybe it pays to look at it as what is actually scale invariant.
I mean, that's a good thing. That's yeah.
I'm asking you, what is scale invariant?
Something that's going to continue to happen through all scales. So I think spheres, or at least rotation. I think rotation might be one of those things. I mean, it may have a
Well,
different
what do we
force.
mean by rotation? Exactly.
And while that would be angular momentum, how? Ooh,
They're not really connected directly because we still haven't established what the source of the motion is. So if we don't like what motion is predicted depends on the model we accept. So if you're saying, well, it's got to be a block and blah, 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 that tells me you don't understand because what the phenomenon we're looking for is non-locality. What is non-locally true?
What are we attempting to describe at this point? Are we talking about something within the system or the system? Or
yeah,
more of a macro
that might actually be a good way to sort of bifurcate the problem.
Because that ultimately I think is the answer. that's basically what that was saying. He's basically, it's like the alpha Feigenbaum bifurcation function, which I kept meaning to learn more about that, and I kept putting it off. I'm like, okay, this is very important, but I get distracted by other things, and basically it's the pulling apart, and ultimately, at least as far as I understand what that's saying, the knitting together again. Because I keep on hearing a lot of these things from, like, for instance, like IHS and everything. It's like it's this bifurcation functions, bifurcation. I keep on hearing this thing, or a bifurcation of sorts. I'm not sure they're necessarily saying how it comes back together though, and this is the point where it's like, okay, and that's why I actually would like to get was it Kaylee Fisher from like a lot of the Wolfram Shoes, because I've been listening to some of her videos on neutron decay cosmology. I'm not sure if she's ever watched any of the stuff that I put out about that things, but I'm like, whether she has or not, I'm like, all right, well, if she's coming to the universal, basically what some may say, manifold of a figure eight, I'm sitting there, I'm like, and just her intuition, and I'm not necessarily sure she's right, I'm not necessarily sure myself or Thad are right, but it's like I see a lot of folks tending towards the same position, or at least kind of the same conceptual framework. I'm like, okay, what knowledge may they have that I can help to better understand what's going on? And I think it's interesting. It keeps on getting my noggin, John, but I'm sorry, Jen.
Oh, I see. You think they have insight about physics.
Well, it's also a different perspective. She's also speaking in a language that's more in accordance with a lot of the established literature. She's saying like AD, CFT, and everything. Because a lot of this, it's like, even if you're right, you also got to communicate to other people. That's essentially the whole thing about like peer review. And could there be some politics get involved and stuff? Like, yeah, sure. I mean, stuff will always happen. But my thing is, if you're putting it out and you're putting it in the way that people are speaking, so because a lot of folks, let's face it, they might skim off it. If they have to read hundreds and hundreds of papers and everything, are you necessarily going to sit there and read it like you're attempting to read like Nietzsche? and be like,
But
all
is
right, I
reading
need
hundreds of papers going to change anything, actually? Like, what type of insight are people capable of giving, maybe? Looking at it that way, and then it'll be more obvious how we have to bridge this gap, because right now we're not at framing it. We're at a description, which is good. It's good to describe the situation and whatnot, but to get closer to helping people, or bridging the gap you're referring to, would appear to be next is to maybe prove that there's no way to get the right answer within their system.
right, right. I think a lot of it just comes down to sharing. Because the one thing I've learned from sales, it's like everybody loves to buy, nobody likes to be sold. Like that's the most important thing that I learned. Because it's like if you go out there and you try to push things, it's like people's natural reaction very often is just push back. Whereas if you're willing to listen to what they've got to say, it's like okay, if I take some of the principles that at least I've heard from Professor Peterson, it's like let me assume I might be able to learn something. And very often you can learn something. I mean, it might just be a different perspective. Maybe it's something you hadn't heard about. But if you can take that, you present yours, and you don't need to shove it down somebody's throat and everything. It's like, okay, you put that out there. It's like, yeah, you can quote unquote lead a horse or a person to an idea, but they don't got to accept it and everything. Whereas you just kind of like put it out there, and if they're willing to explore it, what I'm saying is basically if they can also
Quick
they might be
question. Quick
gone.
question. If I have to sell this stuff, that makes me a pimp, and that makes
No,
my
no,
teachings a
I
whore.
know what I'm
Just
saying.
just to be
That's why I
clear, I'm
say that's what I
prostituting teachings, but the thing is, I know you don't intend it that way, but that's how I perceive it.
right, right,
So I have to ask, why should I prostitute teachings when that literally goes against the tradition?
because since we've reached this point, that's why I said the most important thing I've learned from sales. And if you can just swap that over to the different plane of if you'd like folks to come into an idea, don't try to push it down their throat because like
Okay.
that's why a lot of folks aren't necessarily big fans of some highly religious folks, some religious folks at times. I've got nothing against folks that are highly religious or any form of spirituality. But the thing is, some folks come off as very preachy, like you need to do this and everything. They're very passionate about that. And that just implicitly just turns many folks off. Some folks
I
might be
don't think I'm
accepting of it.
preachy, though, so I don't see how this
I
relates to
think
me.
the religion gets in the way, Jen.
Okay,
Just
but
my
that's
opinion.
your
That's
biased
my
opinion.
perception.
I have more unbiased science, therefore I set the norm. Your opinion
I'm
doesn't
not
matter. So
saying you're
until you
wrong. I'm just
understand that your own
right.
opinion is irrelevant, we can't go forward. Remember, Dawkins, Chopra. What was the problem there? Dawkins was saying, be my fluffer. Chopra was saying that goes against the tradition. We have to bridge that gap. So who ought to conform to the norms of the other? The one with the answers or the one without the answers?
Right, but if the rest of humanity, or at least enough folks, don't
I
necessarily believe the
understand you
answers,
want to
where are
try
we
to
going to get
reason
to?
with me, but reasoning is a very limited way of looking at things. There's essentially no way. The only real choice you have is whether you accept what I'm saying or not. Will you accept it or not?
I thought the whole point of everything was kind of the monadistic behavior, the balance between the two.
Oh, now you're going to speak for God, are you?
Well, I'm just speaking about what you taught me.
When did I teach you about the monad exactly?
I don't know, like 9 months ago?
Who is okay, I honestly have a hard time imagining what is meant by preachiness. Perhaps you mean I'm not prostituting
it's
my
hard to
teachings.
tell. No, it's hard
I'm
to
not
tell because
prostituting my teachings.
no, Jen. If there's one thing that I've learned from my Hebrew brother from mother Duvid is that okay, one of the benefits of utilizing the multiple truth hypothesis is also do the other thing. Let me assume that what this person's telling me is true. If this happens to be true, what may the consequences and what else may be the case? Okay, let me entertain this. I'm like, okay, well, if this is the case, here are the other things I've heard based upon what I've been told and my limited experience in this lifetime. Is this simplest or most plausible answer? I can entertain. If I end up being wrong, I'm willing to correct course. That's the thing. I thought life is just about experience and adapting to the
What
best
does
we
it
can.
matter if you think I'm preachy if I'm right, is the question at this point.
I'm saying you'd be more impactful for the rest of humanity.
Why do I have to be the one who's impactful? If they're so compelling, can't other people preach them for me? Like, why do I have to be the front person?
I
I'm
mean,
already coming up with everything.
isn't this one of the reasons I'm here?
Well, I guess so. So you should be answering those questions, not me. How do you
But
make the teaching? Like, if you want to whore out the teachings, okay, but you got to convince me why it's worth whoring out teachings, aka selling them, aka taking a merchant mindset on it.
no, what I'm saying is don't attempt to sell it. Just kind of put it out there. People will be receptive just due to the nature of if it's right and it's the most right thing out there.
I thought you
And
were just saying I have to sell it because people aren't buying it.
no,
Presuming I'm
I'm saying
selling it
what I've
shittily.
learned from sales. The sheer fact that I use that word has a very specific negative connotation, so we're taking the argument to the limit. It's actually very much simpler. I'm like, well, this makes a lot of sense, and this seems very consistent with, at least in my opinion, God and a lot of the old scriptures over a number of different classifications or however you want to break it down. I'm like, it seems to explain a lot, and if it's right, well, we have the benefit of being correct. I'm saying you can add some flavor and everything to it. You can get excited about it. Just be as genuine as you can. And just if you are biased, just put it out there. That's the thing. It's okay to be biased. We all got biases and everything. Just be honest
Well,
about
am
it.
I biased?
Are you?
Am I?
I implicitly by a lot of what you said, it
Well, you're saying you're biased in the sense that you're implying a religion brings a worse bias than
no, just bias for
non-religion.
anything in general. I mean, there can be multiple incentives. That's the thing. There can be many reasons. The reason may depend upon the observer. Might that be true? A lot of times it might be. Sometimes it's limited information, so you could figure out different things. I apologize. We've gone into eternal cyclic philosophy.
Well,
It's
you
funny
have
how they
to
cross
learn to
so
control
often.
yourself here, frankly.
I do.
I mean, do you want to progress in an understanding? Because you're the bottleneck of this dissemination here.
So what you're saying is we need to pop the top.
What I'm saying is your ability to compellingly impart this rests on entirely on your understanding of it, not your going on rants about how things would be nice if they were that way. That has very little to do with this. Without the understanding, how are you going to know how to make it compelling?
I was about to say I hate it when you're right, but you're
Well, of
right.
course, like you're literally saying you're biased because I'm like, it's like you're not in a position to judge who's more biased and how. I am in a position to do that, but at least I'm polite enough not to say it unless somebody severely antagonizes me on, live, let alone say a wrong assessment. But here's what I was thinking. I was talking to someone who works on like simulating large amounts of proof based on axioms, and I was thinking instead of using I, we could axiomatize that a rotation matrix is invertible. Because right now, it's not the case that a rotation matrix is invertible without having to invoke I. I don't know if it's for every rotation matrix, but
Isn't that just how they conceptualize it? Because it's a complex plane, isn't that? I mean, when you say invert, okay, so I just extends the plane, but you're literally like that.
I'm just saying, like, should we need to double the size? Because you're going from R1 to R2 in complexity to go from R to C. No one's going to deny that a C is isomorphic to R2. Just to be able to invert a fucking matrix, you're doubling the amount of an already unestablished infinity.
I,
You don't see a potential issue with that,
oh, no,
which could potentially
see,
be resolved by axiomatizing an abstract, like, what if the primitives were a matrix or a tensor?
I mean, aren't they?
Now, the primitives aren't tensors, the primitives are numbers.
Right, but you can represent the different metric tensors with
No, they
the
all
matrices.
presuppose numbers. So you'd have to axiomatize a tensor without actually any link to numbers. Because it would have to be essentially indifferent to the numerical system it was used under to be truly applicable on that level.
Isn't that what a zero-dimensional point is for?
Well, is zero-dimensional point redundant? It's actually nothing to do with that, but we can go on to that if you want to.
I mean, like see, that's the thing. I thought the matrices were basically saying, okay, here's the matrix, here's the articulation of whatever's going on, and then you have whatever your other constants or whatever you want to apply to it.
That's not what you should have taken about matrices from quantum. Every operator of quantum is modeled as a tensor, which is like a matrix. That's what you take. That's what you ought to take from quantum with regards to matrices, specifically tensors. The idea is that there's a connection between an operator and its particular values, and that is the connection between an observation device and the observables. Hey, what's going on, Glenn? Nice to see you, man. Hope you're doing well. Everybody else, you know, Mark Smith, John Williams, Moral Outrage Prophet, even Daryl.
So, and Kotov. Oh, those are fancy underwear.
Yeah, wow. Kotov, I couldn't tell if your last comment was a troll comment on my thing, but I did make a meme out of it. It's rather comical.
I think he's often in a high superposition of insight and trolliness. That's the thing. It's like, this is why I say, I'm like, crazy people notice things too, because there are certain folks and it's like, I get shared things. I'm like, I didn't see this before. I actually appreciate being brought to my attention. Other times it's like, okay, that's can be a little much. I realize I'm the same way to a lot of people. What we got here?
Well, you're completely not on track. You're lucky I'm able to ignore it. Most people wouldn't.
Oh.
But I couldn't tell if this was a troll comment or not. But it's from Katav.
I saw that. I saw that earlier. I'm like, I sit there and I'm like, these are the things. I'm like, again, let me apply. I'm like, if this were to be true based upon everything I know, what would be the appropriate trajectory right now? Okay, maybe I don't always follow it, but it's interesting. Yeah.
So yeah. So we have a generic tensor, which would be something that we define as having correspondence to physics, not math.
Right.
See the difference? Right now, the tensor is just a mathematical construct built around what we think physics is, but
right, it's convertible to a matrix.
We're assuming that it is, but clearly, if the measurement limit is a thing, it's not. Like, do you understand?
Oh no, I know. I see the relatability. Okay, it's probably actually easier to. Okay, no, I get what you're saying. Okay.
The degree to which this particular thing is manifested depends on the density of the system.
I mean, my base assumption back when I was, I think, I don't know, like 12 or something years old. It's like, how the hell would you get a black hole? I'm like, all right, you just collapse a thing till it goes inside out. Like, that just made sense to me as a kid. And I'm told, no, that's not necessarily what. Okay, continue. This was my whole pitch of, if you get wicked cool ideas out there, very often they start to manifest. Other people pick up on the memes, especially if they're right.
Yeah, there's a different feeling, isn't there?
Yeah. That's why I'm like, you can't necessarily let it bother you so much.
Yeah, if you want me to not be upset, don't give me unsolicited advice ever. That's a very, very easy way to not piss me off. Is never give me unsolicited advice.
I understand that, yet I still do it.
Well, you've done it a bunch of times, and I understand it's a nervous tick, but if you want to know what's infuriating me, it's that, because it's like, I didn't ask, okay? You're here, and I'm glad to talk about these questions, but it's like, my rhetoric, no. I don't care to hear someone who's less effective in persuasion's opinions on my rhetoric. I understand there's issues with how I present my teachings. I get that. That is itself also a lesson, though. Now, if you can't understand what that lesson is, fine, but that doesn't mean other people don't understand. Don't make yourself in the way of the point that I'm making. I don't want to, you know,
I'm not going to challenge your...
I don't think you have bad intentions.
I'm not going to push back on necessarily the model. I will push back on the effectiveness at communicating it to other people.
You can do that when I'm not around. How's that sound?
You can do whatever you want.
I don't care to hear it. What I'd rather discuss is ideas, because that way you'll be more effective because you'll be more. Right now, you're in a level of appreciation, but you're not able to say why it works. Like, what is it that's going on here? And what's the difference? Like, how do we bridge the gap between where everyone else is and where they need to be?
I I'd like to see some prediction be measured by combination of either what is it, the Simons Observatory and the James Webb. Like if you could get some cool pictures maybe from the James Webb at kind of some of the earliest stars, and if we could actually predict some either primordial, maybe some gravitational B
And what does
waves,
my
or
model say
even
about the beginning of the universe?
you stop a point and things come into balance.
No, there's no beginning to the universe.
Right.
So you're saying predict the beginning of something your model says doesn't exist.
Isn't this what we did last week though?
With what?
Like the whole stream.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
No, you pulled an E break on like the 0 point. If you basically have all the well, it depends. How are you defining universe? Are you just talking about it taking form?
You lost me here.
No,
Like,
no,
isn't
no,
that what
B,
we
B,
talked about
B, no,
last
no,
time?
B. Well, this is why I'm. When you say universe, what's high? See, I
The
thought
way
we
to
talked.
understand universe is if you're trying to adjoin something to it, you've misunderstood the term.
Okay,
Does that
okay,
make
okay.
sense? Like, it's sort of perhaps
Observable
a bit
universe.
irritating
Observable
to
universe.
define
No, no,
things
no,
through
no.
negation. Defining through negation is extremely powerful, though, because if you try to define through positive, you'll find problems with that the negative definition avoids, especially with fuzzy boundary terms. I don't want to say chair, but or all.
No, it's negative rights, or it would be an equivalent
No,
if you
it's
were
really
talking
not.
about it.
It's
Okay,
nothing.
that's it. It
Nothing
sounded
to
like
do.
a good term, and I knew you would correct me.
Yes, but saying bullshit, knowing I'll correct you, is extremely bad karma. You should be trying to say stuff that's correct so that I can
I
further
didn't want
correct
to
you.
use
Because
the
even if you
mental
are
fuel
correct, I
to
can
see if
still
I
make
was
you more
right.
correct. Trying to
Right.
fight
That's
against
why
me
I'm
on this
here.
level is stupid.
Okay, continue.
Right. So where were we?
Something from nothing, or nothing happens to something.
Oh, it was about the universe. So are you
Right.
understanding why I said if you think you can adjoin something to it, you've misunderstood the term?
I'm not gonna. People like to use the term multiverse and everything, but when you're
Can you just say yes or no? Fuck. Do you understand what I said or not?
yes.
You understand that if you think you can adjoin something to the universe, then you've misunderstood what universe is, because that's the whole thing, is it's everything. You know, you can say it's the cosmos, but then you're into a bit of a semantic digression, because what's the difference between a cosmos and a universe and all that stuff? It's sort of just the biggest thing you can really, you know.
Some people prefer pepperoni pizza.
Well, you can see that I don't want to have a semantic debate
Right.
about cosmos versus universe versus multiverse. You know, take your pick. It's the thing that doesn't make sense to make any adjoinment to. You can
I'm just
subdivide the
saying,
universe.
depending on
I'm
your
not
audience, you
saying
might.
you can subdivide the universe, but you can't add to it. See the difference there?
Okay, no. I'm just saying it's
If
like
you think
depending
you're
on where you're
adding to that
going,
set, you're not
maybe
understanding what it is. That's kind of my point
maybe
with
you
when I
prepare
use
a
that
slightly
term.
different meal. It's just you could serve chicken in a whole bunch of different forms. I mean, I like my tendies. Some
Could
people like
you
their
just
buffalo wings.
repeat what I said to me back in your own words so that I can be sure you understand, rather than an absolutely dog shit chicken
When we're
tender
talking about the
metaphor?
one, we're talking about the one.
What did I just say, though?
You can't add to everything.
Do you agree? And plus, that's not what I said. I said when I refer to the universe, I'm talking about a fucking thing that can't have anything adjoined to it.
I'm down with that.
Well, you're not repeating what I said, though, and I'm concerned that you're not understanding it. Do you agree, for the sake of this conversation, that that's okay to refer to the universe?
I'm totally all right with going with that.
So there's no problem at all with that definition.
Continue.
Cool. So where are we going from there? Because you're talking about understanding the universe. Well, we've started by establishing that there is such a thing as a universe. Now, where do we want to go from there? How do we get what?
How do we go from a balance of 2 to where we are now?
All right, what's a balance of 2?
Okay. My mind, I'm going to the spheres using the hyperbolic figure 8 knots complement. And I'm thinking electromagnetism. Somehow I think that's how we get there. Just a lot of stuff.
Do you want to share a screen or something?
This is basically just the best thing that I can come up with, just because if that model is true, and I'm looking at this, and I'm taking everything, because I actually started going through your work the other day, and I'm looking at this, I'm like, why the hell don't you have stuff published? I'm looking at those handwritten notes. I'm looking at stuff of this. I'm reading through some of these articles on like archive.is and everything. I'm like, Jen's got enough for probably like 100 articles right here. I'm like, put it out there and everything. People might comment on it and everything, or want you to put it in a slightly different style. But I'm like, this seems to be very well thought out. It's highly effective at being communicated right here. This is what I'm saying. Well, this is what I'm saying is, if you could avoid getting into fights with people so often, like a lot more people probably would have accepted it. See, that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe I wasn't using the right words before, but I'm
Wait
just saying.
Wait a minute! Stop for a minute. Do you honestly think I don't know that?
Do you?
Well, do you think it's possible that I don't know that?
I think you
I mean,
know
don't
it,
you think
but
I'm
you just
smart?
don't.
You seem to think it's impossible to know something and not give a fuck about it.
But you keep doing it.
Right. So you should try to figure out why, and then quickly come to the conclusion that's very obvious, is that it's a test.
I mean, that can't be the answer.
Why not? You don't set the fucking
because that's
rules,
how I justify my entire existence.
What? I'm confused.
I basically think the same thing about like the way I go through things. I'm like, I should really stop doing this, yet I continue to still do it. And then
why should I stop defending my tradition?
To come into balance.
You're not the one who's going to tell me how to become balanced. You're not an expert on balance. I'm the expert on balance. So it's just ironic that this keeps coming up.
But aren't we both out of balance still?
What's funny is that you think that you can diagnose my imbalances and not realizing that that is a trap that I set up already. And having been told a gajillion times it's a trap, don't walk into it, it's a trap, but you still do it. It's inconceivable somehow that I don't understand it. Yeah, exactly. It's like Daryl. Projection Daryl. Anything anyone says about me, especially if it's bad, is really actually about them. I can do an expanding brain meme on it, but trust me, you don't want to have to not be able to unsee that expanding brain meme.
Is this how we get to 3 will?
I don't know. I mean, these words don't really get at the concepts all the time. Like, you can think of it conceptually as there being a concept, and words can get within a certain distance of it, okay? And when you can get really close to the concept, it's less ambiguous. But when the words can't get close to the concept for whatever reason, there's tons of reasons that can happen, well, there's going to be ambiguity. I mean, you can see how it's a trade-off.
Yeah, no, this is something that Dr. Wolfram had been going on for a while. He's basically trying to figure out symbolic discourse language. It's like, how does one say, it's like, we can compute things, but how does one say, I want a piece of chocolate? how does one actually define that? And it's like, I'm not necessarily sure. You could go into a whole bunch of trying to explain different ways, but at least as a base form of communicating with folks, it's like, yeah, there's a whole bunch of knowledge, there's a whole bunch of fancy words, but if you could express it as implicitly or be able to describe it as well as possible in the simplest form, it almost kind of sounds like some of those fancy math equations. They're like, they're beautiful equations. Why? Well, it's like if it's if it's simple and it gets you the most accurate answer, that kind of seems like something of value. So if you can do that with words, I I think that's useful too. No, I'm agreeing with you.
You do realize that if I had done what you're suggesting, you wouldn't be as special anymore. You're kind of undermining your own specialness. I mean,
I just think we
just
might be running out of time when it comes to the point where it's like, all right, the U.S. and Russia are basically saying, well, war is
oh,
imminent. It might be a
stop.
whole bunch of BS. Oh, here's the thing. Do I necessarily think it's going to be World War III? Not really.
You have
But
to be servile with your teachings because World War III, I'm sorry, but like the Cold War wasn't that long ago.
I understand that, but I'd rather not have. See, here's the thing. I was finishing up kindergarten. This was before they taught us literally how to do zero. I kind of did it like this in kindergarten because it was like 89 going on 90. So I still remember where it's like, oh, something happens, get under your desk. I'm like, wait, if a giant weapon like that goes off, it's like, that's not really gonna matter at all. So it's like there was a little bit of tension. Then people were celebrating the wall and come down. I don't even really remember that. I just remember people seemed really happy throughout the 90s. There were a bunch of cool cartoons and everything. We had Power Rangers and everything. And then all of a sudden we get to the point, 9/11 happens and everything, and this and that. I'm like, if we're to the point now where it's like, if we're actually starting to understand what's going on, and that we could actually have replicators in 50 years, I'd really rather not send ourselves back to the Stone Ages before that. That would be a lot of BS. That'd be very disappointing. I mean, I'm not going to be around to see it, but at least we could put folks on the
Yeah,
path.
imagine being sent back to the Stone Ages because you were so arrogant you couldn't accept someone's authority.
The
That would be
terrible thing
funny.
is,
But you know who's willing to do it? Yes, who's willing to do it?
the
The
funny
one who
thing is,
waits 100 years to come back as a woman just to make a point. Can you do that?
these are questions I've wanted to ask for a while, but I felt they would be very impolite, especially to do it on stream.
Aw, well, I'm
But
just saying, it's like, why? I separate bulls fighting for fun. I don't want to have a bullfight for fun myself.
somehow I'm feeling more and more comfortable with this. But
Oh, okay, good. Okay, can you see what's up there right now?
yes, I
Do
see
you
a
remember what we were
snowflake.
talking
I'm
about
getting
last
very
time?
excited.
Remember last time how I said infinite motion? It's not quite a sphere.
Right,
Infinite
but it's a
motion has
hexagon.
no form. That's what's hard about infinite motion is that it's quite literally the same in all directions. So a sphere doesn't quite encompass that.
Here.
The model starts from infinite motion.
Go on.
So what do you think about when you think about infinite motion?
I want to say the hyperbolic figure eight knot, but I'm like, no, that's something that does a thing. But I'm like, I start attempting to make 44,000 individual spears that are all layered on top of each other because there's 44,000 points
So
of the spear, and then
like
trying
Super
to have them
Saiyan
all
Goku
angular.
type shit?
Oh God. I want to say words, but you're married. Continue.
Oh dear. All right, so
I'm looking for an old tweet. Continue.
it's the state that cannot be visualized. Like ultimately, this state I'm referring to, the infinite motion state, isn't even the unrealizable state. It's technically partly realizable, but I still wouldn't expect to visualize it the way you should expect yourself to be able to visualize a point and a line and eventually more complicated things when you get into higher dimensional, more integrated thinking. So there is a trade off for sure between the 2D thinking we're used to and 3 and 4D thinking. But then computationally, it's really efficient. But yeah, infinite motion. What color is that?
I'm getting an error 404.
So it shouldn't have a color, right?
I I can't. I'm defined. I tend to, yeah.
But if it did have a color, what color would it have? It would have all the colors, right? Means it's not a trick question. It would have all the colors because it's
So
infinite motion, which means it contains
it
everything.
would have everything. Yeah.
Well, color is determined by motion. If it's infinite motion, what colors does it contain? Well, all
Infinity.
of them it must. Sort of.
This is why you got me so excited. Just because I go back at
Good.
one point, somebody's like, "Oh, look at all these snowflakes." I'm like, "What can we learn from the snowflakes?" June 5th. The guy who figured out how snowflakes work. December 6th. This is why I love the internet. I didn't know how they worked, and then Dr. Wolfram started mentioning it, and then that led me to like the proton mean charge radius and continue.
The whole idea is that you want to have a really clear image for the model that actually expresses the model on its own terms. So, infinite motion, we can't associate a color because a color presupposes a boundary. Infinite motion doesn't have a boundary. But if it did have a color, it would be all the colors happening at once. And what's that, memes? We perceive it as white light, right? But we also
Typically,
know it's
that's
erroneous to associate a color to something that's beyond color. So you kind of have to consider these two things at once. That's why you get the like
well,
Frieza Goku type personal model that nobody needs to know about.
well, it's kind of like, see, I always thought it's at least based upon our perception. Whatever we're looking at, it's every color but that color because that's the color that ends up coming to us as
You're
far as
talking about
representation.
reflection and how it forms light impressions. It's completely not. We're talking about a
Can,
single
can,
fucking
can,
entity
can we
here. We're
just
not
take like a
talking about
log
light
of the
reflecting
entire
off shit.
wavelength of light? I'm just
We're just talking about what light is conceptually.
right. Okay. Can we just add them all
Do
up?
not invoke more complex concepts when we haven't even got past the first. Like, you understand, we're just talking about a source of light. We're not talking about what you're saying, which it requires light to bounce off a surface. So if you presuppose a surface in your reasoning, what about the surface are you presupposing exactly?
Cones.
Well, you can look into a light, like something can, like, anyway. You're not
Oh, this is
presupposing
why
cones,
we
no.
need those crystals that Professor Keating had because then it split. Okay, no, it polarizes. It makes it easier. Okay, separates it too. Yeah.
Holy fuck. The point is that you have to understand how to use the metaphor or it's useless. The point is you have to start at infinity motion and slow down. Right now, what people are trying to do is accelerate from nothing. That never will work. Only thing that will work is slowing down from infinity. And the better you can visualize infinity, the more accurate your model will be. So what we're looking for is crystallizing dimensionality, which is a fixed thing, 3 plus 1, under some meaningful infinity.
Ooh. Is this?
You know, it's okay. People in the chat, I gotta say, I do really appreciate memes being here. And people in the chat, you know, it's okay to say you don't friggin' know something, especially Daryl.
No. This inherently should make more sense than last week, because last week it's like, all right, you got everything. Stop at a place, and it's like, what would one conceive of might be the case? Now we're like, okay, we're going from the limit. Oh, this is what you said, the limits. Okay.
Well, the direction I think people should look in is understanding that the ratio 118 to 4 might be a universal constant of some sort. It may not be fully a precise exact constant. There may be like some proportionality. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet. I don't want to get ahead of what people are actually understanding because then it's defeating the purpose. It's like, I'm not doing this to teach myself stuff I already know. I want other people to appreciate this. So there you go. what do you think about this diagram here? On the left-hand side is what I'm trying to get across to you right now is the infinite motion. That's the thing that's actually continuous. Right? Like how remember all the times I've spent trying to dissuade people of this notion of continuity? What are the arguments against continuity?
Wait, I don't know.
You should know them off. So what's the earliest argument against continuity? Xenos paradox.
Because there can be a smallest point. You can't continue to subdivide further. Okay.
The only way the assumption of that paradox works is continuous space. It disproves continuous space. But we have way more evidence of discontinuous space-time now than we used to. You should be able to cite more than one example, which is just a fucking thought experiment at this point.
Well, we're just talking about the break in scale symmetry, which now that I'm thinking about
it's not a break in scale symmetry. It's a demonstration that space cannot possibly be continuous. Space cannot be arbitrarily subdivisible.
Yeah.
Now you want to state some more evidence to establish that as a fact.
Okay.
Katov, if you've solved it, why don't you tell us the solution rather than just troll posting in the chat here?
I've gone to his website and the links don't really, at least the last time I checked. I tried, man. I tried. I heard about different stuff and things. Apparently you're clean now because you were taking it. I'm just saying that might be more appropriate for Pornhub, assuming you're of age. I have a blue check mark over there as well.
Are you seriously telling me you can't find any fucking other evidence for quantization of space-time, given you know more about Thad's model than probably everyone, except for like a very small group?
Well, no. Well, he has the parameters and everything, and okay.
Are you telling me Thad's model doesn't predict a discrete space-time?
Well, yeah. It gets the Planck length.
It predicts which is discrete space-time. Right. I mean, if space-time was continuous, you could not define a Planck length or time. Do you agree?
Well, it's going on. So I'm just that's why I was kind of using the matrix thing earlier, because I'm just saying, all right.
Are you seriously saying that you don't understand what I'm saying here? Like, the Planck length is the quantum of space.
Yeah.
So if that's true, doesn't Thad's thing predict quantization of space?
Yeah.
So there's another piece of evidence. I said, what instantiates the quantization of space-time? That's more evidence. What else? Can you really not think of anything else?
I thought you said something different. I thought you
it's
said
quantum state exclusion. Quantum state exclusion.
Oh, the Pauli exclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So we got four things: Pauli exclusion principle, quantum state exclusion, which is basically
the
same thing.
We're attempting axiomatization. Okay, I'm sorry.
We are not attempting axiomatization. We aren't even at that stage yet. Why would you think we're attempting axiomatization? I'm trying to help you understand what the reasoning is behind this approach.
Okay, we're reasoning ourselves into axioms. Continue.
It's
no. I'm not disagreeing with you. I thank you for putting up with me.
It's fine, but it's a multi-level integral processing, so you can't axiomatize it.
So straight logic.
It uses axioms. There's no doubt that it uses axioms, but it instantiates multi-levels of axioms almost every time. And there's no way to know how many levels of axioms you're going to instantiate in advance of examining the problem. So you can't pre-axiomatize something that's essentially pseudocode or like a generalized method. Kind of see the difference between...
we need to set up as many, okay, well, we're sciencing then. We're setting up all the layers of all the most amount of evidence. Basically, we're setting the boundaries of literally what we know, so we can describe what we know the best way we can.
And I'm trying to help you get out of your own way to see in your own perspective what the answer to a question must be. Because then you have the actually going down the path to discover it. If someone tells it to you or spoon feeds it, it's like almost an insult to your intelligence. You're muted. Okay, Katav, I honestly, memes, you are still muted. I honestly totally love what Katav is saying, but please provide evidence. Just this unsubstantiated stuff, it does, it's.
You should come on Describe, and maybe if you have some pictures or something sometime. I'm happy to speak with you, as one sciencey troll to another. It's perfectly fine. Oh, and Jen, you might appreciate this. You'll get a little mad, and then I think you'll appreciate it. But I was looking at Wolfram Alpha, and I took was it 118, and I just divided it by 4, and one of the related things that came up was the Mankey like versus Guar like curve versus the 3-limb seated forward bend yoga pose curve. And it's very interesting because it's got a bunch of equations too, see? It gives the Mankey gives that, and then apparently that's supposed to be some ratios, and then it's got numbers to basically model the curves, and oh my god, oh my god, there's so many numbers. What was that? And this all came to us brought by 118 divided by 4. Oh well.
So if you divide 118 by 4, what happens?
I don't know. Well, it just okay. Well, we'll actually go back here. Let's take it. Just goes like 59 and a half. There was what was it? What was the other one? It's like one other little thingy here. Like this is all it comes up to. Now, if we were to parameterize it in a particular way, would that mean anything? Do we need to have like separate out a particular number for space or something? Maybe there's 44 something for. Well, that might be interesting. That's some numerology. But what was it? 29 to the negative 1 times 59, blah, blah, blah. Or 29 plus 1/2. Well, you also get the Fari sequence. And again, this is just my Wolfram Alpha recommendations and stuff like that. I don't even know what this is. So any positive integer n is a set of irreducible rational numbers. A divided by b with 0 is less than or equal to a, which is less than or equal to b, which is less than or equal to n, and a and b equals 1. Range of increasing order, the first few are more information. No, I didn't want that whole thing.
This is not interesting, okay?
Okay.
This is the stuff you figure out on your own, and then you show the result later. Just randomly going through sequence and series. That's not the point of what we're doing here.
I'm bad at doing stuff by myself.
Well, you're with me here now, so it's the time to use it to its fullest capacity rather than rambling. Using me as some kind of tutor? No, that's no. So Katav actually said something good in the chat here. Why is space quantizable? Because time is, well, why are space and time coupled? Exactly. So back to the point of all this. The ratio 118 to 4 says something. What is it? Memes.
Maximal packing capacity.
What's 118?
It's that element 118. That's the number of protons.
What does 118 represent?
Maximum density.
All the possible microstates of matter.
Okay.
And how many elements make up the 118? 4. Protons, neutrons, electrons, and photons.
Okay.
That's the important ratio, 118 to 4. What does that mean?
I mean, we need to separate. We separate things out by mass and length then.
Well, no, just try to understand the concept. It's not about mass and length. This is pre-length. This is pre-spatial.
Mass and energy. Okay, yeah.
No, it's about the number of microstates per elements. There's 4 elements and 118 microstates. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I mean, 118 microstates? Are you talking about the individual protons, neutrons, electrons, and photons? Or
the protons, neutrons, photons, and all that, those 4, those are elements. The microstates are what we're calling elements now. But actually, the element is the indivisible thing. So technically, the elements, quote unquote, should be the set of 4.
It's the
If we're going to
maximal
use
construction of base building blocks.
go back to yes, but also go back to a thermodynamic perspective.
Okay.
We've got 4 things, which are then making 118 things through a permutation across space-time.
It's the maximum structure that's allowable.
The structure, the integral structure of space-time transcends dimensionality. It transcends scale, sorry. Scale. Let's go with scale.
Oh, you're setting the limits on construction. I see what you're doing there.
See, it's a top-down.
Okay.
This is why so you see how the top-down must work, why the bottom-up must not work. Because how do you ever meaningfully get recombinance of the infinity?
I mean, doesn't that just assume for gravity or just orientation?
I'm not sure what you're asking there. Okay, now just the random numbers being put in the chat there, that's not helpful.
Well, to be fair,
I'm not talking to you, memes. I'm talking to the people saying like 29.5
just
in the chat. It's like,
no, because when I'm looking at this, I mean, I tend to agree with you. Just, well, then again, I guess we could look at it from a bunch of different ways, so it doesn't really matter. Does it?
it's not about agreeing. It's just about understanding what the argument is. Like, what are you going to argue with the periodic table? Existing?
I mean, the way it's constructed.
Okay, so here's a fact. There's 4 different types of orbitals, SPDF. There's 4 different types of basic, quote, elements comprising what we're calling elements now, which are proton, photon, electron, neutron. What I'm trying to get at is that 118 to 4 is, in some sense, preserved. It may not be numerically preserved. Like, I'm not saying divide that shit by fucking 4.
So don't do what I just. Oh no! And again, is that an extremely base thing to do? But I did that with a proton charge radius with that number. I'm like, oh look, 137. That's very interesting. Okay. But again, I think that's just implied from charge radius because I'm like, of course it's gonna look like the fine structure constant because the electromagnetic coupling constant.
What does this have to do with any of that?
No, I'm just saying base numerology. It's also a way that if you happen to be right, and it happens to be something that a person is familiar with, like at least on the internet, we're used to like 1337 and stuff like that because it was like read on a calculator back in the day. But this is the thing: if you can mimetically engage people, and this is what I say I'm here for at least. It's like if I can get people around me that have the right answers, and I can help meme it into existence. It's like okay, it's. I'm just saying I find it fascinating. I'd like to see more and more folks talk about it because the more I talk about, the more people bring me to the attention of other things I didn't know.
Yeah, so Anders, what Anders says there, did you see what he said in the chat? Anders is apparently a Platonist of some sort.
I mean, what you were saying earlier, very often it gets described, maybe not in the exact same Platonic ways, but it kind of sounds like Platonic forms in a way, or at least that's my best conceptualization. There's probably a higher mode of thinking about it, but
honestly, it's not that Platonic because most of Platonism is extremely emotional, like the good, that's essentially an emotional argument. This isn't really an emotional argument.
I don't know. It's easier to conceptualize if you're trying to imagine the concept of chair or category of chair, because then that can go through different forms, and it's easier to relate, I think.
Well, you understand that if this is true, then there is no, quote, Platonic chair. There's literally almost nothing in terms of Platonic objects. It's just these abstract geometries. And you could even argue they're not even part of the realm.
So we're talking about orbitals.
I'm talking about forbitals, my friend.
Forbitals? Go on.
Forbitals, yes. 3 + 1 to be precise.
Okay. We have our blocks. Now our blocks are doing some things. What exactly are they doing?
I don't think that that's necessarily accessible to us because I tried to go into the infinite motion before and you just completely weren't able to follow. So maybe conceiving of the infinite motion is not possible and it's just better to go to the applied model, which is this, which actually has a well-defined form, which is still
Let's
really
go
hard
back.
to
No,
understand.
let's go back to the infinite model because now I have nicotine. Smoking is bad.
Yeah.
Smoking is bad. Continue. Okay, so sphere, infinity, probably part of my resistance is because I also don't necessarily want my conceptualization as a 10-year-old trying to think. It's like, how can I attempt to explain everything? And then basically just a spherical ball of light just kept going, and I'm like, okay, this is the answer. But I still wouldn't let myself accept it.
There's nothing wrong with wanting something and not fully knowing what it means and just being sort of not ambivalent, but like withholding judgment. The longer you can do that, the better your judgment will be.
It's creepy as hell, though.
It's okay. It'll be fine. Everything's going to be okay. What's scarier? Facing the source of your fear or knowing something is out there that scares you that you're too much of a coward to face? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying you're a coward. I think you're very brave to come on the show, frankly. Boreas is saying I'm not being nice enough and, maybe I'm being too harsh and blah, blah, blah.
No. It's balance.
My
It's
intentions
balance.
are pristine. I just want to give you the right perspective so that you can take ownership of the answer. Like, I trust the answers. That's why it doesn't really feel like I'm proselytizing. I'm probably pretty forceful, but I do want you to come to the answers independently because then you'll probably get more insight than just me telling you, which you might not even ever fully accept it if I just tell you. Then I'm banking on your faith in me, but
No.
I'd rather bank on your
Again,
faith in you.
multiple truth. Assume what the person is telling me is true, and it's like, okay, if I'm going to utilize that as a mode and actually believe my own bullshit, I need to do it right. And if it happens to be correct, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Self-actualization, bro.
Okay. Let's think about it step by step. If it's true, and I'm not saying it is, but let's just do a super simplified demonstration here where we say, okay, there's a fixed universal ratio between fundamental constituency and simulated constituency. Four fundamental wave identities simulate 118 microstates or 118 elements in the periodic table. Can you follow that? I'm not saying you have to agree. I'm just saying, is that making sense?
No. It's a solid. You utilize the periodic table as a mode of parameterization. It's
So
part of the standard
is,
model. Yeah.
The first question is why. The first question is why. Why is it 118 to 4? Why is it I put 4 in, I shake it martini style, and I get 118? I mean, that's the simulation, right?
Now, do we have to include photons? Because aren't photons...
Bro, it's 3 plus 1, bro. What do you think the 1 is, bro? It's fucking photons. Because it's another infinity.
Wait.
Pill.
So you're not just saying you're... Oh, okay, hold on. So you weren't just utilizing 3 spatial dimensions and... Oh!
See, now the monad doesn't have a sound, but if it did, you know what I'm saying?
That's
might be a little bit like what he just put out there.
That is fascinating. Okay. Okay. All right. It's okay. Yeah. It's... I was going to argue with you before about how kind of localized time and everything works because I had my own thing with like neutrinos and everything, but yeah, this is a simpler thing. And to be fair, neutrinos are still included, or they're just a byproduct.
I don't know why you have an emotional attachment to neutrinos, man. Maybe you need meditation or something.
Well, to be fair, we're talking about the construction of this. And to be fair, neutrinos aren't technically included. Oh, battery's not included. Technically, the battery is included in this.
No, Lambie, the monad doesn't have a sound. So that was definitely a joke there, but I was happy that he sounded excited. Look, you gotta just entertain the idea for what it is. 3 plus 1, transcendental computational principle. You and your ability to apply that, that's the bottleneck there. It's not about neutrinos. This is about, does it make sense to them use that ratio to analogize all resolvable, possible meaningful resolutions of matter? Because we have more than 118 things that we can make meaning of, do we not? We must.
Yeah, it's a lot of different forms of things out there. This is very interesting.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how this is going. Like, so 3 plus 1 is the thing, but you approximate it as 4, and then we can approximate once again with 118 to 4 as some type of I don't want to say rule of thumb, but guiding principle. It's just like, how do we then? Because we can't necessarily expect, because what is it that's giving us a ratio? Do you see how it's the measurement limit that's giving the plurality of 118 versus 4? Like if you permute 4 through the measurement limit, you get 118.
So I was starting to do this before, and then I got sidetracked with something else. But I was looking at basically the Planck mass and its ratio to the Chandrasekhar limit, and just attempting to see if there were any inferences at different ratios between different things that may lead to obstructions of us observing and seeing what might be going on there. And I'm curious.
This is not observable here, so just so you know.
118?
The periodic table cannot be observed. It is a fucking amalgamation of a bunch. It's a collection of meta observations, I guess. God forbid.
Yeah, no, it's just a list of observations.
Well, no, it's a patterned configuration. It's more than just a list. Katav, 118 is the number of elements. Okay. 4 fundamental ingredients, 118. So to go from 4 to 118 requires a geometric permutation that I'm arguing in some way transcends the orders of magnitude. So basically, we'd expect something like, if we knew the plurality on either end, we could estimate the other distribution. You see how we have like 4 and 118 already as the cookie cutter to now, if we can apply it to other situations, we should be able to count those and we can know things about them without counting them as much. I don't know if that's obvious. Like, I'm not saying the relation holds arbitrarily, but there is a sense in which the relation holds.
It's element 118. It's Ogneson.
It's nothing that this is nothing to do with element 118. It's the fact that there are 118 elements, just to be clear on that.
Now is 294 the unified atomic mass units given to the longest slope? Is that of any relevance too once we add in like the neutrons and stuff?
I'm not sure how. Probably it's relevant in calculation of stuff that Thad's model predicts. Because it's the limit. It's the limit point solutions, right? Again, it's the limit point solutions, right? So, what's the measurement limit in the HF8 complement?
Planck mass.
The measurement limit is the hyperbolic figure 8, not because
Okay,
everything
okay, it's
except it
generated.
is permissible. So everything but the limit is permissible. So what is the analogy to that in the periodic table? Everything but the limit is permissible. The limit is 118. You understand?
No.
We can't go past 118. Why is that?
Oh, it's the maximum we can get for the
It's the
assembling of.
space-time limit. It's the limit of space-time continuum. Limit of the space-time continuum. So there's different limits of the space-time continuum depending on how you understand a space-time event. So if you understand a space-time event as the hyperbolic figure eight knot complement type understanding, well,
How do we get from that to that? Okay.
it's all about what's excluded. In the quantum periodic table, what's excluded is the limit. The limit point's actually included in the QMPT. That's the difference between his and mine. Mine includes the limit point, and his maybe doesn't. But anyway, that doesn't matter. Such a minor pedantic thing. No big deal to be better than a computer.
Hmm.
But yeah, if you wanted to, that would be like limit point behavior. I'm sure I can add it back in if you want to put it back in.
Oh,
If you
no,
think there's anything
it's no,
of
no,
use. But
I'm
like,
just
I want it. Like, I do want you to use Wolfram, but right now, how are you going to use it if you
fair.
don't understand what you're using it fucking for? Do you
I'm just
understand what I'm
looking for.
saying? How are we going to simulate this? Like, do you understand what the problem is? Is that everything is linear and we need stuff to be spherical. So we've
Right.
got to computationally reconcile those two things.
So we need more pi.
I have no idea where you get a derivative notion like pi from what I just said. Katav, it's a bit tough as to whether there's 118 elements because the Platonic sense, and I'm sorry to use that term, but you know, the Greek sense of the term elements, there would be 4 if we're looking at the periodic table the way the Greeks would have if they had access to it, right? Because they're looking, when they're saying elements, they're meaning the bottom. Okay. So elements is what we've called it, but it would be something else if we were actually elementizing it the way I want to.
So I took the charge of a proton.
This is again just gibberish here.
Yes, that's gibberish. But this is the most beautiful. Okay, it's only approximately 17 times the number of arrangements of a 3x3 Rubik's Cube. I just thought that was freaking funny right there because it's also 17 tilings to get to the masses of the different.
Well, if you want to be able to say why, understand my system. Don't you want to be able to fucking solve this shit? Like, that's what I don't understand. It's like, I don't give a shit about these numerical problems. You're the one who cares. Don't you want to actually know how to solve them? Like, look, how do you think you solve shit like that? Like, you just have to figure out how to take this thing. What's the fastest, aka the shortest, the simplest number of changes to this thing to get the basic shape you're looking to model?
Are Rubik's Cube's kind of like a matrix?
Are Rubik's Cubes like a matrix? You established that I should give a flying fuck about your dog shit metaphor and then we'll talk. But as for now, like,
Okay.
I don't know what the relevance of that is. I'm sorry to anything. It's like, can you summarize what I said about the 4 versus 118 thing? Like, did any of that sink in? Slash in the audience if you'd care to summarize what I said, because I'm really hoping that this point gets across.
I thought it was you had the 3 basic geometric objects that are the building blocks, and basically everything's run by photons.
Okay, what are the 3 building blocks?
Protons, neutrons, and electrons.
Okay. No, that wasn't the point. Sorry.
Okay.
The point was those things permuted across the measurement limit, giving a resulting 118.
From what persists through. Wait, hold on, wait. But we. Oh, okay. Yep. Well, we can't measure the mass of an electron. We can calculate it because we can measure its charge.
Where does this require us knowing anything about that? I mean, this is a geometric argument.
Okay.
It works for the elements, sure,
No,
but
that's fair.
who cares? Okay, yeah, Lambie, I get 118 is bigger than 4. The question is, how do we go from 4 to 118? That's a question.
So, like any good physicist, we put it in a box.
No,
'Cause-
you can take the periodic table and turn it into a box.
Go on.
But it's not a box to begin with. Remember, it has infinite motion.
It's a hypersphere.
It doesn't admit a
Hypercube.
geometry. Now, okay, in math as it exists right now, is there
We're back at
something that models
infinity.
and stop? Is there something that models infinite motion? That would be useful to me. That would help me and indirectly you, because I would be able to teach you about it. But is there such a thing? Because I'm not aware of any such thing.
I thought that was like the complement of the hyperbolic figure eight knot. It technically goes on and
So
on.
you're saying it has infinite motion.
Well,
I'm
if it's eternal.
inclined to agree with you. Okay. But it's not primitive enough. Do you understand why? It
Well, so geometrically
it admits a geometric
Right.
decomposition.
Hmm.
The one does not admit a geometric decomposition by definition. Like you can't defy the definitions of the terms or they stop working. Oh yeah, the whole arguing thing, like, yeah, everything's fine. This is fine. I mean,
Some people get butthurt
I'm
about
fine.
words on the internet, but again, mean words may hurt my fee-fees, but I still grew up in a time where sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. It's like, all right, I hear folks saying, oh, mean words on the internet. And then I notice some of these same folks occasionally will be like, can you believe the mean words people are saying about me on the internet? It's like, the hypocrisy thing, I'm just like, okay, my channel says free speech dragon eternal. So it's like, I gotta try to, and to be fair, I'm learning. So it's like, okay, I just view it as mental sparring. Sometimes you get smacked down like Wile E. Coyote. You just blow on your thumb and puff back up again.
Yeah, take on someone your own size.
Okay.
Does this make it more clear? Like, there's
Are we going by
elements.
charge boundaries here? Is this what we're...
There's 4 elements, but there's also 4 levels of unfolding. So you see how there's 7 different
Wait. Okay,
levels?
so green is protons. The yellowish...
No. Listen, stop for a minute. Green is the
Okay.
s orbital. Remember, 3 plus 1 is transcendent. So in the cases of the orbitals, it's a synthetic 3 plus 1. That's just a reflection of 3 plus 1. That's why it's 4. Okay? That's not the real 3 plus 1.
Okay, so I'm
It's
just
an
seeing this
illusion,
now.
Michael.
Okay. Yeah. Continue. I didn't know. No, I literally just noticed what you're showing me. Okay,
Yeah,
I
so
did
for
not
me,
expect
the
this.
challenge for me and why I'm sure it sounds like I'm a lot more mad than I am, because I'm not mad. Like, I'm fine. I'm just frustrated that it's not, I just wish I was better at teaching, basically. It's just frustration at myself. I don't get what you aren't seeing. See what I mean? But now you said kind of seems more. It's like you have to see the symmetry pattern all at once. And the 3 plus 1 of the s orbitals PDF and the 3 plus 1 of the proton stuff and the 3 plus 1 of the geometry, those are all different 3 plus 1s, but they're all 3 plus 1 for their own reason.
Yeah.
Remember?
I do now. I literally just didn't make that connection until... Okay.
So we've made 3 interpretations, plus now we can make 1, where we generalize the 3 into 1 operating principle, which is this 118/4 thing I'm trying to get you to start to discover on your own. Because that's like the diffraction.
Can we start from like the top? Are these directions? Are these...
Fuck, dude, directions have not.
We're not there yet, are we?
No fucking directionality.
Okay, we're going...
Not
okay.
even close.
It's...
We're at pre-directionality at best.
Okay, we're at balance. Whatever.
We're at understanding why the state beyond visualization is truly unvisualizable, as well as for most beginners, the adjacent state to the unvisualizable state is also, for all intents and purposes, unvisualizable, which is why I'm alluding to this infinite motion state. Okay? And I'm furthermore saying it doesn't really matter because you don't need to conceive of infinity to use calculus. That's basically what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't actually matter.
No. It's getting creepier. It's getting
creeping up
creepier.
on you?
No. When I was 10 years old, I think I was like in the 6th grade or something. And at one point, I'm like, I had all these ideas, mostly came about from video games. I'm like, all right, it's gonna be this big, like infinite, like kind of like a sphere, but I'm gonna spread it out because I want to like fight like evil, like gods and dragons and stuff like that in this zone. But around the outside, there'll be this trans-dimensional gateway. And I'm looking back, I'm like, all right, I'm talking about a hypersphere. I'm talking about basically a torus and everything, and be able to access anything from any particular. Basically, I had a notebook and I wrote the Book of Infinity on the cover, and I meant to like write down all my ideas, but then I played a bunch of video games instead. I'm picking up where I was at like 10 years old. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, just go to the next step where your internal life is also a video game.
It's basically where it's going.
Yeah, 3+1 vision. They can't animate video games in 3+1 vision. They can't even do 3D. They can't. I mean, hyperbolic geometry. This has been a really good session because it's helped me get these ideas, at least in succession. So I appreciate you being willing to talk this out.
No, this is not what I expected, but this gives me a far better all I know is I meant to do something completely else, but this has given me a far better intuition for the things that I wanted to do and actually submit and actually let people look through. Gives me a far better structure of argumentation and higher likelihood of actually being right, or at least far more correct with what the hell I'm saying. Thank you.
So the question, there's a couple more questions we want to think about, is how many things can we resolve? So I've resolved the QMPT, and I've also established that there's 14 orders of volumetric magnitude between the proton and the largest interstellar distance. Does that mean there's 14 separate things that can tell us as much as the QMPT can? I wouldn't go that far. But I would say, based on our experience and our own consciousness, there are other levels as the periodic table that we can resolve in theory with the same level of precision. And there's some numerical correspondence that we'll discover together, I guess, in some sense, as we go.
It's going to be.
But yeah, that's where I would want to. That's where I would say to look for the next step. And like, we still didn't get through infinite motion. So do you want to stop now and take a break, or do you want to try to keep going through the infinite motion and then slowing down model? Anders says, biggest error in math, Riemann sphere plus infinity equals minus infinity. I'd be interested to hear more about what you think on that.
I thought a Riemann sphere. Oh.
I don't know much about Riemann spheres. Like, I wish Anders would come on the show sometime and talk to us about this stuff, because I don't have a lot of practical experience with them. Like, I'm aware of them as a concept, and they're really good for compression. Are you looking at bringing one up now?
Well, yeah, we can do that. All right. It basically, as far as I understand, it's just a
holy fuck! If KMG is talking about me, he's fucking scraping the bottom of his shtick by now. I hope that's not the case.
All right, here we go. We get a Riemann sphere coming right up, processed by Wolfram Alpha. Bada boom, bada bang. All right.
Assembly of God. That's a very nice compliment. Thank you.
It's given to the complex plane together with a point at infinity, which has a topology of a sphere. So basically, it's going to bring us to the same thing, isn't it? I don't know. Plot.
Did we go over what I was saying earlier about oh yeah, I think I did mention this. Like, rather than have I axiomatize that rotation matrices are invertible under a specific number of steps, and that maybe the degree of this could be something you could actually put into Wolfram's rule space, because you could say the rule is manifest dependent on like a density argument. What are you doing here?
Playing.
Random shit. Should we try and understand as
I
much
don't
as
know. It
possible so that you
looks
can
kind
get
of like a
better? You're
snowflake.
still stuck in the second dimension
Got
here.
1 and -1.
What's important in the second dimension versus the third and fourth is not the same things. So
Right.
to be able to see why things must be a certain way and et cetera, it's really just one idea and seeing at what angle the idea lines up with reality. But on the level of the quantum periodic table, how would we then take that and apply it to generalized causality? I don't think that's self-evident.
Degrees of motion.
Degrees of motion, yeah. What about the degrees of motion do we want to codify into the math?
It's a very good question.
You want to
This is why
start thinking about what makes something a solid.
okay.
Well, what makes something a solid?
The particular microstate.
Because it basically can't
The
get any fatter.
parameters, because okay.
It can't collapse any more basically than it already is. Like you start with plasma, then you go to gas and liquid and solid, and then there's nothing past that. And if you try to go past that in terms of like getting more densely packed, because that's essentially what a solid is,
So we
more
should
densely packed constituent matter, it self-corrects to instantiate the de facto universal axiom of maximum density, which is what I tend to refer to as the Pauli exclusion principle.
So what you're saying is I should map out and plot all the different elements and their different forms.
You
and
should understand
give it
that
a
the
relevant-
elements aren't the thing that is actually the fundamental level. The fundamental
Right, but-
level is beyond perception. The next to fundamental level is also pretty much de facto beyond perception, but I'm calling it infinite motion.
Okay.
Excuse me. Then I'm saying we can go past that and make a metaphor for this primary state,
Okay.
which would be
Geometry.
does there exist something in math right now that models infinite motion? If there was, like, remember what, again, back to what Dr. Wolfram said, what is the analogy here? What already in math exists for us to tap into if we're looking for a construct to represent infinite motion?
Infinity. Or circle.
Infinity, circle, ooh, I think we can do better than that. As far as we know right now, infinity is one-dimensional. That's not going to work. And a circle is also pretty much either one or two-dimensional, depending on how you want to look at it. But it's pretty flat. I'm talking about a formalism, like a model. Like I was gonna say superfluid. Isn't that the answer? Well, can a superfluid be used to model infinite motion?
I mean, technically, that kind of sounds like what Dr. Wolfram was saying about his atoms of space, and if everything is made of atoms of space, it's just going to be a different.
Why isn't it? Because something exists that's more fundamental than space, and that is
Energy.
Space-time.
Okay.
Try to express it. I think we should try to express it in language people already are familiar with.
So we're going for accuracy.
Well, of course, we're not going for accuracy. The periodic table is perfectly accurate. The model isn't going to necessarily be accurate.
Okay.
Why would the model have to be accurate? We want okay, so I get what you're saying here, but the model, we want it to be intuitive, don't we? We want people to be able to use it.
Well, we just change the topology to something that's easier for
But you just,
human beings to understand.
Can you acknowledge what I said though? You said it has to be accurate, and I said no. We want it to be intuitive. It should be as accurate as possible, but it should be primarily intuitive because if it's not, no one's gonna be able to use it.
Right. It's more.
That's what I'm
saleable.
saying. And then I said, what do we have in existing math doctrines to tap into something that's got infinity motion?
You're talking about the superfluids?
And I suggested a superfluid
Like helium-4, which...
as a construct.
Oh, so we can actually do observations and stuff. Okay, cool.
No, we're not at observations. The thing that's superfluid is not observable. A superfluid as it stands would manufacture positive energy. That's a problem, isn't it?
Is it?
Well, isn't it? Do we live in a universe that can manufacture energy? We don't seem to observe that. We seem to observe conservation of energy. It's not the same as creation of energy.
I thought it was accelerating.
Expansion doesn't mean increase of energy.
There are other ways to account for that as well.
I appreciate what you're saying, but can you acknowledge that expansion doesn't necessarily mean more energy, because it could just
no,
be that
it
there's expansion somewhere and
does
collapse
not.
somewhere
Yeah,
else?
it does not say
Yeah.
that, but there's a chance.
I'll say that the universe self-induces motion, and that the fact that there's expansion that can be established is evidence for that. I'll say that. And that's how I would suggest wording it. You see what I'm saying there?
What does the universe maximize for?
Efficiency.
That's a good one.
Transformation.
No,
Efficiency.
that's see.
Okay, there's a set number of microstates it can permute through, and it's gonna
This is why
go through them with maximal efficiency over time. That's what the simulation is called learning.
At one point, I entertained the idea. I'm like, what if it maximized to create positive energy? But then I was thinking about that. I'm like, no, that doesn't really seem. We would probably have different observables.
But then you realize you shouldn't have taken 8 grams of mushrooms.
No, I only smoked half a stock that once, and it was mostly opium and stuff. But my thing is with this, I'm like, I was watching some of Kaylee's videos. She's going over the neutron decay cosmology, and she's saying so many of the same things. Again, she was another person that had those 7 circles and everything. I realize it's not necessarily the same thing, which is how she was describing it, utilizing words based upon some of the things that you were kind of saying, and a bunch of other literature, and Dr. Wolfman as well. I'm like, what if the universe maximized for complexity?
It has a finite complexity. I've just spent all this time arguing for a finite, some type of a complexity coefficient that is finite, and not just finite, but predictable, a 118/4. And again, how are you going to define complexity? It's not just about... Okay, listen, there's 2 considerations in a definition. 1, it can't be self-refuting. 2, you have to be able to access what it is that makes science work through your definition. That's non-trivial.
No, you got to define what is. That's the thing.
No, you don't. You don't. But you can't define complexity in a way that fits within what I've defined strictly as boundary criteria of acceptance.
I just know that if that were to be the case, it would explain this exact scenario right now. Because to get from a whole bunch of very hot, just expanding whatever it is there to us, it's pretty difficult.
How can you have conservation of energy? How can you have ongoing motion and no creation of energy? Tale as old as time.
But that's also assuming that there is no potential positive.
How do you understand something that's self-contradictory? How can something be taking in nothing yet moving forever? That's an infinity motion machine. That is something that can't exist. How can our universe exist? Is it somehow founded on a contradiction? If so, what is it?
0 divided by 0?
No, it's got to be something physical. Certain conceptualizations are self-contradicting. Permanent change, that is self-contradicting.
I mean,
but it still works. It works as a model. There are some things that are permanently changing, like materiality is under constant state of change, even if it's self-refuting.
I think we just went hyperbolic.
So anyway, I'm not saying the superfluidity concept is a good one, but it's a good start for the material, because we've got to model the next to empty state, the pure potentiality state.
Can I steal woman your argument?
Of course you can. I'd be
Okay.
happy to hear.
No. The reason why I say this, and I love this, is because on one of the science Q&As that the good doctor had, at one point he started talking, and he was talking about folks basically utilizing liquid helium in some of their experiments, and being like, well, there's no way we could possibly account for blah blah blah, this and that. And apparently behind the scenes he had spoken with some of the folks doing some of these experiments, and being like able to potentially recreate the similar state. So over several hour period, you will see literally the exact same fluctuations. And he's like, well, some of them, they say, occasionally we do observe this, but we don't publish any of the results because basically people would make fun of us. Because it seems so completely out there. It's like, this can't possibly be possible. But apparently it does happen. Just
Yeah,
people
I
are
mean,
afraid about
honestly,
getting
it's
roasted.
like people are using like they're like this model makes me feel weird. It must be wrong. It's like
No, that's terrifying. No, because that's literally experimental evidence, basically. I think saying what you were just saying. It's just people are too scared to
I
say it.
don't think we're gonna solve this today, but I think we're closer. That we have to like. Do you understand what I mean when I say information-rich primitives? And how right now the primitives are essentially the Cartesian plane. Like that's a conceptual primitive in some
Well, we've
sense.
been doing the same thing for a while, and we've been milking it, and it's yielded fruit. Now to the point, it's like, maybe we need some new ideas and stuff. All I know is when there's a lecture the other day, and some dude's presenting something, I'm like, that sounds a lot like that model, basically within ZXT. And at one point, I hear Professor Ed Witten being like, well, if you take that to the limit, you went to the realm of quantum gravity. And he's like, the response was, indeed. And I'm like, that reminds me of Professor Wolfram just bantering with Jonathan a little bit. I'm like, I don't think I've ever heard Professor Witten literally just like stop talking and then just continue listening like that. I'm like, it was fascinating. I think the ideas are getting out there. I'm just saying these are good times. So it's a good time to parameterize at the best core you can. Because at that point, if you got a strong foundation, well, you can build as tall a tower as you want within whatever limits there are within the universe.
Well, my whole thing is let's not have any regrets. And that comes with being perhaps irritatingly trepidatious at times, but I'm hoping we can look back and see why it had to be this way versus some other way that I just don't think would have been as good. There's no value proposition for me to vomit this shit out to myself.
Oh, that's fine. But if we're going to continue, I do need to at least take a break and grab some food and stuff. But well, we can do it again later. This has been a good stream.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up for now. It's an awesome show, and thanks to all the people who tuned in. Just before we go, what we're looking to do is right now we're imagining X, Y, Z going on forever. Imagine the ends of it connecting back to each other in a Mobius strip type, the simplest Mobius strip that you could possibly imagine all at once. It's your basic 8-sided thing. Little fairy there. Anyway, teaser for the next one. You are all very welcome, and I hope this was beneficial. Memes, what do you think? Better? Did we get more good than existential terror in this exchange?
Making me feel like a kid again.
Yeah, are we at least at 51%?
It's at what I've been saying I wanted, but then I'm like, that's not possible, and I'm like, it looks possible.
Maybe it is possible after all. All right, cool. See everyone real soon. Tomorrow, tune in 7 p.m. Eastern for Weekend Review. One and only Doofit. Good night.